The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy by Douglas Adams is special. But it's special in so many ways, and for so many reasons, that it's kind of difficult to talk about. Where do you begin discussing such a unique, groundbreaking, monumental, and joyous work of science fiction? I recently asked my patrons to vote on which book I should reread next. And this particular poll was a sci-fi exclusive. All the books on it were science fiction. And this won by a landslide, and I was really hoping that it would. I've been eager to reread Hitchhikers for quite a while now. That said, my patrons and I have set myself quite the challenge in trying to talk about the importance and the power and the uniqueness of The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. In case you've never read it, here's what it's about. First off, this large hardback volume that I'm reading is a collection of all 5 books, but for this video I only reread the first one, The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. That said, when I finished it, and I read it in a single day, I was so eager to continue. I haven't yet, but I think I might. Because I read all 5 books in a row about 10 years ago, and I remember the second one, The Restaurant at the End of the Universe, being my favourite, and now I'm itching to read it this very second. The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy is the first book in what's known as a trilogy in 5 parts. It was originally published in 1979, 45 years ago this year. And that first book is only 150 pages long. We begin in 20th century England with a man named Arthur Dent. Well, we actually begin with half a page dedicated to a woman sat in a cafe who has just figured out the key to happiness. She's figured out how everything works and how everything should work, but she doesn't have time to do anything with that information. That light bulb moment is squandered because the world's about to end. And so we follow a random Englishman named Arthur Dent. Arthur Dent is around 30 years old. He moved out of London a few years ago and he lives in the countryside. One day he wakes up in his very unremarkable red brick house. And as he's slowly waking up and drinking coffee and brushing his teeth, he notices that there are a bunch of construction workers outside and a bunch of yellow machinery that has come to bulldoze his house in order to build a bypass. So he does the only logical thing. He goes outside and he lies down in the mud in front of the bulldozer. And then we cut to a friend of his, a man he's known for some years, who is secretly an alien from a planet somewhere near Betelgeuse. This alien, when he arrived on Earth, took the name Ford Prefect, which I think is a car. Prefect's real job is to wander and explore the galaxy and compile new information for an updated version of a book called The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. And Ford has just received a warning that an alien race has come to Earth to destroy it in order to build a bypass. And the only person that Ford has time to rescue, or perhaps cares to rescue, is his friend Arthur Dent. So he grabs Arthur, they hitch a ride on one of the ships of this destructive alien race, called the Vogon. Earth blows up, and Arthur's the only human left alive, to his knowledge. Also very early in the book, we cut to a man called Zaphod Beeblebrox. My partner insists it's pronounced Zaphod, but I'll have no truck with that. Zaphod Beeblebrox happens to be a former con man, a very unlikable person, a guy with an enormous ego, who's not as charming as he thinks he is, and who happens to have become president of the entire galaxy, because that's just how things often work out. But Beeblebrox only wanted to become president in order to oversee a ship that was being built, an incredible, impossible engine. When the ship is finished, he goes to the ceremony to unveil the whole thing, and he steals it and flies off in it. That's all he wanted, and he got it. The ship is called the Heart of Gold, and it is propelled by the Infinite Improbability Engine. An engine that can do anything and go anywhere simply by calculating the probability of doing that thing. It's brilliant. So when Ford and Arthur are captured by the Vogon on their ship and thrown out of the airlock, they are rescued by Zaphod Beeblebrox, another Earthling woman that Beeblebrox happens to know and is kind of dating, and a very, very depressed robot. It's never said in the book why he's depressed, but the implication is that he's intelligent. He's the most intelligent robot thing in the whole wide universe, and that intelligence burdens him to the point of being depressed. It's a really short book, and it's really old, so I could just relay the entire plot from here on, but I won't, just in case you haven't read it and you want to experience it for yourself. I felt like I was talking for a while there, but Hitchhikers kind of has that effect on you. It's a very exciting plot, and you want to keep talking about it. Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy is one of the most uniquely unusual books I've ever read and reread, in that it gets better as it goes. It gets more and more exciting. You meet more people, you get to know those people better, the humour ramps up as it goes. Adams lays on the weirdness, the sci-fi insanity of it all, slowly, bit by bit, eases you into it. And as you get used to this impossible world, these ridiculous concepts that he throws out, and you find your feet and you think, okay, I understand what's going on, I'm wrapping my head around these absurd, impossible, surreal concepts, he increases it. He turns the dial and everything ramps up. And we go to impossible places, we learn impossible things about the truth of the Earth, about Arthur's place in it all, and about life, the universe, and everything. But there aren't many books out there like this, that don't just hold your attention till the end, but only get better as they go. It's a very Moorish novel. And like I said, the thing that most people talk about when it comes to Hitchhikers is the humour. It is a comedy novel, first and foremost. Maybe the humour isn't the most important thing about it, but it's certainly the most prominent thing. It's the surface level thing that everyone talks about. Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy is hilarious. Laugh out loud funny. And you will laugh out loud. I certainly did. I've read it before, and I continue to laugh at certain points. It is hysterical, and it's a very, very British sense of humour. So everything is delivered in a deadpan way. Characters are not telling jokes, they are simply talking, remarking on things, often being sarcastic, and it's hilarious. It's very, very uniquely British, much like the works of Terry Pratchett. In fact, when we think of satirists in fiction, we think of Terry Pratchett and Douglas Adams. Douglas Adams did it first, and Hitchhikers remains one of the most beloved novels in the entire world. Because of its humour, because of the big philosophical questions that it doesn't just ask and sometimes answer, but also makes fun of. It likes to tease the concepts of philosophy and existentialism, our place in the universe, and it very boldly antagonises religion as well. Douglas Adams was a fervent atheist. He believed in the beauty of discovery, the beauty of possibility, the beauty of science and exploration and invention above all other things. You get the impression reading these books that he saw religion as something lazy, an easy answer that keeps people kind of dumb, discourages people from asking questions, being inquisitive and curious, and kind sometimes. You get all of that just from reading these books. He doesn't have to say a word. And as someone who also believes in all of those things, as a humanist and an atheist, I also believe in curiosity and kindness and invention and discovery and possibility. And all of that is front and centre and delivered in such a wonderfully sarcastic, sometimes sad, often dark, but always hilarious way. When I think about the age of this book, the fact that it's now over 42 years old, I am stunned. For a few different reasons. Number one is the pace and tone of it. As the decades have gone on, authors seem to have developed their skills when it comes to pacing. Even some of the best and harshest and most literary novels of the 21st century have a grasp on pace and tone that you rarely saw several decades ago. But Hitchhikers has it. Hitchhikers manages to be a very, very smart, very imaginative, very thought-provoking and philosophical novel that is also short and brisk and punchy, and as I've said, hilarious. You can tear through it in a single day, you will laugh all the way through, it feels fresh, it feels exciting, it feels original and vibrant. And books of its era, and I've read a lot of them, didn't carry that tone and didn't have that mastery of pace. For the book to be so short, especially as a big epic sci-fi adventure with so many concepts and ideas and philosophies being thrown around, it's quite remarkable. And I'd say it took guts and probably a lot of editing to get it this sharp, this short, this precise. And for all of that to work and to carry these ideas forward, masterful. If you've never read or watched or listened to any adaptations of The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, you still might have heard certain things, like the number 42. 42 is an important number when it comes to The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. And it's because 42, at one point in this novel, is provided as the answer to the great question. The great question is assumed to be life. The question of life, the universe and everything. And the answer to that question is 42. And it doesn't make sense. So then we have to work backwards. Well, the question isn't a question. The great question of life, the universe, and everything is not a question. If you say that as a sentence, you wouldn't put a question mark at the end. And so we have to figure out what the question is. These are the kinds of wild concepts that Douglas Adams presents us with. The idea of calculating an answer to a great question, but then realizing that you don't have an idea of what the question is, but you do now have the answer, is hilarious. And there's so much more humor besides, and a lot of the humor relies on surrealism. For example, there is a moment in the book where our protagonists have 2 missiles fired at them. They're in the heart of Gold's ship, and they're about to die, when suddenly those 2 missiles, almost impossibly, are suddenly transformed into a vase of petunias and a sperm whale. And at that moment, those 2 things start to fall to the earth. The sperm whale has just come into existence, and we get its first and its final thoughts before it goes splat and explodes. Those thoughts are rapid and very positive and happy. The whale is excited to be alive and is coming up with words for things as it looks around. Oh, this is my tail, this is my head, this is wind. Oh, look at the thing coming towards me. Oh, it's moving very quickly. I wonder if it wants to be friends. That thing is the ground, and it kills him. It's dark, it's wonderful, it's hilarious, and it goes on for a full page. Then we cut to the petunias, and the only thing that goes through their mind is, oh no, not again. That, of course, makes no sense whatsoever. We get no resolution for it until the 3rd book, which again is insane. To call back to that and kind of give an explanation for it in the 3rd book is nuts, but that's Douglas Adams. Douglas Adams must have realized that science fiction is an engine for infinite imaginative possibilities. The only limits to storytelling in general are the limits of your imagination. Douglas Adams must have taken that and ran with it in a way that few can. But you can't just throw any ridiculous concept at the wall and hope that it sticks, because it won't. And so Adams grounds all of it in philosophical questioning and satirizing those things, and creating a character who is bland and uninteresting, sarcastic, dour, moody, grumpy, and very, very, very British. We have Arthur Dent as a linchpin in the center of this book for every ridiculous thing to spin around. And the reason those ridiculous things don't just fly off is because he takes those things, he learns to accept them, he learns to understand them, he learns to go with it, and he makes dull, sarcastic quips about them. And it grounds everything. The gravity around him is very intense. You cannot throw moments that are created by the infinite improbability engine into a book and hope that the reader will just enjoy them, because they are detached ideas. Yeah, they're funny and goofy and ridiculous and wild and imaginative, but they are juxtaposed by Arthur's very existence and his personality and his dialogue. And so he creates this kind of gravitational hold on these things. Keeps them feeling as though they are possible because they're happening to this particular man. The fact that they're happening to him makes them feel more possible and more understandable. And that's incredible. Adams realized that you could do anything with science fiction. Any ridiculous thing in a very Star Trek way, but have it all happen to this guy, this uninteresting, sarcastic man, and it works beautifully. You can see this a lot in fiction. I often think of the works of Neil Gaiman. Neil Gaiman is one of my favourite writers. I grew up with him. He's the reason I'm such a big bookworm, but his protagonists are so often pretty boring, dull people. Shadow in American Gods, whatever his face is from Neverwhere. These men are not interesting people, but they ground you. What makes Arthur better than those protagonists is that he's also hilarious. His British sarcastic wit is tirelessly funny, honestly. And then you have the concept of a depressed, hyper-intelligent robot. If you need one quote, at least in my opinion, to really show off and deliver the dark humour of The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, it's this bit here. But what are you supposed to do with a manically depressed robot? You think you've got problems, said Marvin, as if he was addressing a newly occupied coffin. What are you supposed to do if you are a manically depressed robot? No, don't bother to answer that. I'm 50,000 times more intelligent than you, and even I don't know the answer. It gives me a headache just trying to think down to your level. The coffin bit? It's the coffin bit. I cried with laughter reading that. I love Marvin. I could go on and on and on quoting this book forever, and I've tried very hard not to do that here because Hitchhiker's quotes are everywhere. People love them. The opening page of Hitchhikers and The Restaurant at the End of the Universe are 2 of the most quoted opening pages of any book ever. There's also the line spoken by Ford Prefect about religion. Isn't it enough to believe that a garden is beautiful without believing there are fairies in it too? There's so much greatness in the dialogue and the descriptions and the plot and the character writing. It's all so fantastic. The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy is one of the greatest novels ever written in the English language canon, full stop. And I could talk about it for days. But now I'm faced with a dilemma. Do I keep going? Do I reread the whole trilogy in 5 parts? I don't know. I've got other stuff to do, other stuff to read. We'll see what happens. But it's amazing how dark and heavy so many of the themes and topics and events of this novel, this whole series are, and yet they bring us so much joy because of how Adams explores them. Through humour, satire, wit, sarcasm, and through a wonderfully diverse cast of pretty unlikable people. The bleak British humour of it all carries the entire thing, and I'm very grateful for that. Adams was a great satirist. He was a great comedian, and he was a revolutionary science fiction author, and I don't know where we'd be without him. I have no idea what the landscape of literature today would look like without Douglas Adams. A few years ago, I went to visit his grave in Highgate Cemetery, where his ashes are buried. There's a little stake in the ground that just says 42, and there's also a pot in front of his headstone where people traditionally just leave pens. When I went to see it, that pot was overflowing with biros. It was a beautiful sight. I'm very, very grateful to Douglas Adams, as we all are, countless people around the world. These are favourite novels for so many people. Whether you're a sci-fi fan or not, they're books that transcend that. They go beyond genre. They ask such enormous questions and then make fun of those questions in a light-hearted but also heavy and dark way. Existentialism is a huge part of this. And Adams recognised that and felt the need to poke fun at it in order to stay sane. And it is remarkably well handled in a very even-handed way. Through all of the surrealism and impossibilities that we are faced with when reading these books, all of that is transcended through humour and wit, and a grumpy British man carrying around a towel. There's nothing in the world like The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, and there never will be again. I'm pretty confident in that. And the fact that there never will be means that we have to hold on to this thing. If the world ended tomorrow, just like it does when the book begins, I've often told myself that I would grab a copy of Frankenstein. That would be the one thing I would take with me if I was saved. If I was the one person left, and I somehow hitchhiked onto a ship, and the rest of the Earth was gone, the one thing I'd take with me is a copy of Frankenstein. Now, after rereading this, I'm starting to think it might do me better. It might keep me saner. It might not be more important, that's impossible for me to say, but I certainly think it might be more important for me to have this by my side. It is, after all, The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. That was such a good way to end the video. Oh my god. Oh, I'm so happy with that. I really hope you watched to the end, because that was brilliant. Subscribe for books.